think we jump right in. I'll start with just one more thank you, and I'll probably do a few more by the end, Larson. But since everyone knows you, we don't need a huge intro since you're a mentor.
Yep.
I'll turn the floor over to you, and you get the lead. But I'm here to support you in any way you can. I'll be hanging out the whole time.
Perfect. That sounds great. Excited to be here today with all of you. I've actually done this presentation, I think it's 12 times now for different programs around Techstars. So like, it's always does a little bit of a different iteration on it. And I've actually never done live demo feedback, like live on a kind of webinar type of deal. So I'm really excited to get to that part. If anyone has the guts to show up here and want to do some quick feedback and all that stuff. So that's just a little bit of a notice for the ending here. So if anyone feels really inclined to take a crack at it, would love to workshop with you a little bit here towards the end. But just again, by way of introduction, my name's Larson Stair. You can feel free to be on camera, off camera, but I will bring people back in, and I'm going to try to be as engaging as possible to make sure it's just not me talking at you for the next 45 minutes or so. Really, the purpose of this discussion here today is, as the meeting says, as you can see my screen right now, it's the art of the demo. So really, but before we jump into all this stuff and how to run a great demo, how does this incorporate into a sales cycle? When is the right time to do a demo? Let's just take a step back here for a second, a little bit of context setting. So again, Dave gave me a great intro, but who am I? So my name's Larson Stair. I was part of Techstars Boulder 2020. So this is me right over here, right behind over on the right-hand side here. This is our program. Wild to look back on. I started a company called Demo Flow. I had to bring out the old t-shirt just to reminisce a bit. That's my co-founder, Jack. So Jack was he was the CTO technical side, and then I was on the sales side of the house. But when we ran that business, my background is entirely in sales, B2B SaaS. I've been an SDR, I've been an account executive, I've been the demo expert. They're called solutions consultants. So that's really my space, my jam. We ran this company, graduated from Techstars, raised about 4 million in capital. And then we sold that company last July. And since then, I've just been roaming the world trying to figure out what my next thing is. So I've been doing stuff like this, jumping out of hot air balloons. That's also me right there. Was part of my hobbies. I'm a wingsuit skydiver as well. So when I'm not building software or selling software, I like fly through the sky. That is me in a penguin costume. Yes, jumping from a hot air balloon. Yeah, okay, let's keep it fresh. And then this is what cool jump we did in Moab, Utah. So we were out above the desert. So when I'm not doing these things, I work with early stage founders to help build a revenue engine. That's really what I do. So everything from sales, demos, anything in the sales cycle, and also helping out with fundraising for seed stage. So that's really what my jam is. I've done it before, I've done it for a while, and that's what I work with a lot of people on here. Or of course, if you want to go skydiving, I will happily be your coach on the skydiving. With that, without further ado, what you can expect out of here today. So obviously I can't see all of you on this, but I'm trying to keep my eyes open. If you have questions, comments, concerns, feel free to put it in the chat. I'll make sure I keep a good eye on the chat for the whole group here, and we'll answer those questions whenever it's appropriate. So just throw them in there as they come up, and I'll make sure we're addressing them. Okay. Nice. You jumped in Hawaii once. It was awesome. I think I talked to your husband about that. He's saying, I got to go out there and jump there. It's reinforced there. Excellent. So what can you expect out of today? Nothing drives me more crazy than know-it-all advisors that come in and just tell you a bunch of like fluffy ideas. So that's not what I'm going to do here. What I'm going to provide is really tangible, like concrete advice. So as you're exiting a demo, how should you exit that demo? When you're running through a feature demo, what should you do there? How do you go before you show the product? How do you show the product and afterwards? So tangible advice, stuff that you can actually put into practice today. What does that really boil down to? Today is just going to be broken into kind of 4 pieces. First piece is the art of the demo. So how do you set up for a demo? What do you have to do to get yourself ready to actually show the product? How do you run a demo, of course? And then we're going to switch gears a little bit. And then for whoever wants to run a live demo and do live feedback, I will certainly call on that person. And absent of that, Gigi, I'm going to call on you. Sorry, but we're going to I'm just kidding. But then
we're doing that later. I'm already.
We'll do it later. It's all good. We're doing it later. And then we'll end with some Q&A, some closing and questions. But feel free to interrupt me at any point throughout this presentation. I'm going to move pretty quickly because I also hate PowerPoint slide decks. So I like to keep the pace up. So keep things interesting. And I'll also pause and ask questions and see if anyone else has any other feedback or questions or anything like that. That all sound good to everybody? Good. See some head nods. Okay, cool. All right. Excellent. So with me? Excellent. Cool. All right. So how do we do a great demo? With the arc of the demo, how do we really run through this in a way that's really engaging, creates parallels between pains that you've uncovered from that business or prospect, and showing the right features to create that business alignment and have them really see, whoa, okay, this thing can really change my life. The most important thing, I'll start right, most important thing right out the gates, it actually has nothing to do really with the demo. Has everything to do with discovery. And this is the most classic mistake I see everybody make. I made this mistake. It is, trust me, I know you've been working on this product you've been building for months or maybe years, and it's your baby. You created it. I know what that feels like. And so you're proud of it. You really think it can help everybody out there. And so the instinct is to show it quickly, get into it. The product is going to sell the thing. That's not the case. I promise you that. And that is not the right way to go about it. What you need to do first is you need to ask them questions. You need to ask them questions about their business. How do you do business today? How do you think you should do business in the future? Why can't you do that today? And you do not have permission from me to show your product until you understand these key pieces. So that really just breaks down to a few core tenets. All right. So once you gather these kind of key pieces, then you should be in a really good spot to run through a product, and you'll even better know exactly what to show them. And the bottom line is there's probably 2 or 3 things that are really going to sell a deal, not 5, not filters, not 10 things that are going to take an hour long to show. You need to be laser targeted here. So when it comes to a discovery call, first thing you need to ask, really simply put, this is a framework called gap selling. And I like it because it's a really simplistic information gathering piece. So simply put, how do you do things today? Really simply put, you could be as simple as that. So in my world, when I was selling demo software, tell me a little bit about what the demo process looks like today. Who's involved? When do you run the demo? Do you run on the first call, second call? What collateral do you include there? Also, where are points of friction? This is an important piece. Points of friction in how they do stuff today are more obviously pains, but it also is a nice lead into how do you want things to improve into the future? Okay. And so I put this language quite purposely very simplistic because I think we tend to overcomplicate like how to ask sales questions, and casual tones are great. It disarms people. It makes it feel less scripted and feel what have you. So really, I think, so I saw your LinkedIn profile. I saw you work in legal, or you work in marketing, or you work in sales, or whatever the person is. What we're working on as a product, we really operate in this marketing space or sales space or whatever. Would you mind giving me some insight into how does business work for you today? Tell me about your department. How big is it? How do you operate today as it pertains to category of your solution? Right. So you start out that way, and then you get them to detail. Remember to ask follow-ups. Then you say, great, you tell this points of friction, and these are some issues that you pointed out. How would you go about solving that? If you could, wave a magic wand, that's a classic example, right? The idea here is not that they may not know the right answer. That's fine. But you get the reason why you want their perception of the future is so that we can understand how they think. They say, oh, we think we're going to build it in-house. So it can uncover potential objections about how do they think about solving problems in their own organization. And from there, you can tailor your solution a little bit more narrowly to what's going to resonate with them. And then lastly is, and simply put, so you mentioned you have these problems today. This is how you think you should solve it in the future. Why can't you do that today? What's preventing you? Budget. Oh, we don't have engineering horsepower to get that done in the timeline we need it. We can't find the right vendor. All of them require 3-year contracts. All of them, and all of these things give you insights into what can work for them and what can't work for them. Then and only then can we actually go into the demo. So these are really critical pieces to gather and uncover. It's very counterintuitive because everyone shows up, they click request demo and they book time on your calendar and they're like, great, I want to see this demo. So you think you have to show them a demo. Not quite yet. So go get this piece of information. And I promise you every single demo you'll run thereafter will go far better. because you'll just know more information about who they are, how they think they should solve problems in the future, why they can't get it done today, how does decision-making hierarchy work in the organization, so on and so forth here. I want to pause here for a moment. Any questions on just discovery process, anything I ran through there, anything else anyone wants to add in terms of how they think about discovery or questions they might be asking? Really good at calling people out too. Oh yeah.
Just along the lines of pricing. So some of us are in a stage where we either have active sales going on that are following a demo. So I'm just wondering, can we include like pricing discovery in that? As you're asking, what alternative solutions are you using, or how are you solving this problem? How much does it cost? What are you willing to pay? If the approach that I try to take is to identify whether the natural value propositions we're delivering with our product or desire about the customer, then asking them, hey, how much are you willing to pay for these particular value propositions that can be solved for you? Is that in line with this stage of customer discovery or discovery call?
Yeah, certainly. I do believe that you should give a ballpark of pricing early and often. And usually like we could do a whole separate conversation around step down on pricing where you say, we're going to start a brand new product from scratch right now and say, hey, we think we're going to charge 30 to 50K for this in an annual subscription. What we're doing as a starting point is 20K for these different pieces here. So you wrap their brain around the ballpark by which you're in. You can also say similar solutions like X, Y, Z are in this range and we're this minus this, but I like to bring it in early. So that could be on discovery call, could be in a demo. You got to make sure you have the right people on the line that can stomach whatever that price point might be. And then certainly once you get past the concrete product overview, then you can go and let me generate a proposal for you. Let's walk through this together. But ideally, you've understood their current state, future state, what metrics they're trying to improve. And ideally, what is the monetary value of those metrics? You can get to a dollar amount of what that problem is costing them. You're in a really strong position. I promise you that. That's a really good position. Did that answer your question, Jodo? Yeah. I mean,
when you do customer discovery, do you follow the mommy test script where you ask them, tell me about a time when you did this, when you did that? Or how do you phrase your questions?
Yeah. So I go from broad to narrow in terms of my last question. So for you specifically, you're basically bringing, was it 15 different GPT standardized prompts into like large M&A models, right? Or maybe it's morphed a bit.
Something like that.
Okay. So what I would understand from them is, so tell me a little bit about, you're looking at companies you want to merge or buy or whatever it might be. How do you go about making those decisions today? Who's involved in making those decisions? What information do you need when you do all that? Like all the process behind what you solve, right? Getting the details of all the people, what data do you need? Really, you're just trying to understand how do they go about making their processes today.
My worry with that approach is be like, are you telling me you're an expert in the space and you bring an expert solution? And now you're asking me all these like generic questions.
Sure. Yeah, that's a fair point. What I would probably do in that situation is I would scour the internet for news articles, investor reports, anything I can find on that business and say, so listen, I was looking into your business. I noticed that you have a history of making acquisitions and this space. I'm curious how you went through how you made those decisions as it pertains to those specific companies. That is more of what I would call a power question as you start the call. It establishes you as a subject matter expert and it shows you did your research for them. And then you are off on the right foot. So that's a great point. That can be a really valuable way to start off a discovery call by doing that type of background research.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Tori.
Can you talk more about like the monetary value that the pain point like solves for them? What if they don't know? They know that it's a problem, but then they're like, I don't really know dollars and cents associated with it. We just know that it's a problem within the organization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do we go about doing that? Like a phrase that I like to use is, this may sound like a silly question, but why is this meaningful to improve this metric? Like, how is this going to change your board report? When your CEO goes back to your board and has their quarterly earnings report, why is this a meaningful thing to change? Like, how do you think this will change that report back to them? Do you think it'll impact the revenue? And you can almost serve up to them some ideas. And so a lot of our customers find that it really makes a big impact on generating more revenue or shortening X, Y, and Z sales cycle times or whatever it might be. Offer those up as a menu of sorts.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
And a lot of times that can extract some good details from folks. Cool. These are great questions. All good to go? All right, let's roll. Okay, cool. We did our very thorough discovery. So now now we're ready to jump in the demo. Okay. So how do we set up for running a great presentation? It's quite simple, but really where I start off is, hey, can you hear me? And can you see me? Like the basics, right? I think everyone's doing a pretty good job of that right now. I like where camera levels are at right now. We're pretty good background, not a ton of distractions here. Like those are good stuff. Do I have all my assets prepared? Am I customizing things? Is my product ready? If you're in like a demo environment, or even if you're using like a Figma mockup, we've done that before in the past. What type of customization do we want to be doing? And am I prepped with all my information that I gathered from previous discovery calls, any news articles that I may have found, or interesting bits of information that can help me be more engaging in discussion? Those are really important. Really, when it boils down to, can you hear me? Can you see me? You have good earbuds in. This was a feedback from one of my co-founder in the earlier days where I had the wired headphones and it was janky. And so I actually have a full on like boom mic right here that just is sitting right there. I think AirPods work great. I spend most of my waking hours on Zoom calls, for better or for worse. And so I've invested in a nice camera. I think it's well worth it, just because I think this all boils into good communication. And then lastly, like my background, I'll say I have the luxury of having an enclosed office. And so that is a luxury. I wholeheartedly agree with that. This was in the heart of the pandemic. This is my background here in a much smaller place, of just up to the back. But like the purpose of this is my camera is facing to the background. Nobody can walk behind me. If you have the ability to do this, I try to put some nice artwork or whatever just to make it interesting and more professional. So just some thoughts there that could potentially help with creating the professional environment you might want. Now on the front side of things, we talked a little bit about this, but sales assets. So what kind of deck are you going to use here? I think Gigi and I were just, I think it was a couple of days ago, how we're saying we need to create decks that are more catered towards companies and enterprises by comparison to colleges. So that's one branching point of a slide deck. They have different value points in there. We might even get to a spot where we customize the first or second slide with some information that we learned from them on a previous call. So the deck feels like it's built for them. You can even throw some logos in there and such like that. So you pick whatever you want to do, but these little pieces can make a big difference when it comes to just getting yourself prepared to run through a storyline. When it comes to prepping your product, one thing like a very concrete recommendation, when you're in the really early days, sometimes products don't load as fast as we might want them to, and migrating around and navigate around can be disjointing. I always used to tab out. So my dashboard was on tab number 1, reporting was tab number 2, and tab 3 was the user settings or whatever it might be. And so I'm just basically jumping from tab to tab. Everything's preloaded. And so there isn't any dead air, which I think can be an important piece to just trying to avoid any dead air time. So just getting your product as prepped as possible. And then lastly is prep yourself. Make sure you have your notes readily accessible at your fingertips from last time. So you really want to keep coming back to comments that were made on previous discovery calls and bringing those back into comments you're making in the product demo. So the more you can bring in what they said and incorporate into what you're showing, the better things will go. Questions so far from anybody? Yeah, John.
We had a question around like sales kits with like the sales assets. When is it appropriate to equip the team with that? Is it after the initial discovery conversation and it's like we've gathered data, we want to come back to them to have that follow up? Or is it something we just equip immediately during the discovery call? It serves like a marketing proper, if you will.
Sure. Yeah. And you mean your team, or do you saying when do we equip prospects?
My team.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in an ideal state, you're running a discovery call without the assistance of slides, ideally. And then maybe that comes a little bit later. But I think it's always okay to have that early because the pitch is very fluid in the early days. Like what you think is going to work one time might change 2 days later. And so I just think that could be a good crutch to be utilizing and having that at your disposal at any given point in time. So that's what I would say. I'd say earlier and often, but I'd try to wean your way out of using those as a support there. Cool. Anything for anyone else? Cool. All right. Let's keep rolling. Okay. Pretty simply put, can you hear me? Can you see me? My Wi-Fi good? Is all my tech all set up? Do I have my sales assets in place? Do I have the right ones? Do I have some handy customer testimonials if that's relevant? And is my product ready to go? And am I ready? I'm trying to find let me see I use this, I'll send it afterwards, but I use this Zoom app in meeting to help take all my notes. It's not the Fathom note taker. I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but it helps me create an outline of my whole entire call with questions I want to be asking. And it's embedded right into Zoom. So that could be a really good tool. It's called Fellow.app. It's been really handy and integrates most of the CRMs I work with. I promise I don't work with them. I don't really care if you use it or not, but it's been super helpful for me. And I use it almost every single call. And it links my notes together too. That's a really good way to have all the information right at your fingertips and not have to gather it all ahead of time. You can use it on investor calls too. That's always a pretty easy thing to do. Alrighty. Live demo time. You all still with me? Yeah? Head nods? You don't have anything else to add? Anything I missed here so far? Am I wrong?
I might have one.
Yeah, what's up, Gigi?
I don't know if you touched on like your cringe things that are like absolutely do not say this in the discovery call. And not that I know because I've never said them.
What did I say again? What were some of those? I have a lot of them, but
The only one that I have written down is game points.
Oh, yes. So when you're in a discovery call, I would highly recommend not to say, so tell me what pain points you have. I promise you what they're going to say after that is I don't have any pain points. A different way of saying it is, so tell me where there's friction in this process here today. Where do you think it could be a little bit better? Where is it taking too much time? Where do you think this is a really more or less saying the same thing over and over again, but you get the point. Is this a different way of approaching it? And every time I have done that in the past. And anytime I said, what are your pain points? People would say, I don't have any pain points. And then you're caught in that awkward limbo land. That would be one. Also, don't tell people you're not trying to sell them. That's a bad idea. I've probably told it to multiple people here already, but if I say, hey, I'm not here to sell you something, we'll be like, you are absolutely going to sell me something. 100%. Like, no question. I think don't do it in emails, don't do it in the calls. It's just because otherwise, are you really not there to sell them something? Of course you're going to try to sell them something. That's what we're here for. Little weird isms I have. Cool. All right, moving along. So in terms of concrete, one of the things, what can you expect from this whole presentation here today? An outline. So this is a kind of more general outline that I think could work quite well. This can work for a 60-minute demo, full length, or even further if you want, or a 30-minute discovery demo, right? A disco demo. So like some folks like to do discovery and demo on the same first call. There's certainly credence to that. It's slightly more challenging. And then some like to split them up. But really simply put, brief introductions, run through a quick agenda, do a summary of last times. That's quick and to the point. A lot of founders, I think, have a tendency and like to give a brief kind of holistic overview of what the company does. I think that's can be appropriate here. Could be appropriate in the discovery call too, just to set the framework or context for the call. And then you'll go into more like solutions preview. What does the actual product actually look like? And then next steps moving forward from there. Pretty standard outline, fairly simplistic. Let's break this down a bit. So intro and agenda. So one piece of advice here, as you have your first discovery call, let's say you break them up. You do a 30-minute discovery call, 45-minute demo, let's call it that. Maybe one prospect joins the discovery call and you said, hey, who else do you think would get value out of seeing the product? Which you should say at the end of a discovery call. And they say, oh, my boss or my colleague or whoever. Great. Let's bring them in on that call. It's a way we call multi-threading. You get 2 people on a call, 3 people on a call. You build relationships with multiple people. Now you have a wider influence as opposed to single threading. It's one person. They'll just shut you down, and then you don't have any other points back into the company and you're SOL. So once you get that new person on that demo call, introduce yourself to that new attendee and say, hey, how can I make this a great use of time for you here today? Or Gigi says, hey, Gigi, sorry, Gigi, I'm going to pick on you to the right of my screen right now. So thanks so much for taking the time. I had a great call with Dave last week. Really excited to chat with you. If you wouldn't mind, would you mind just give me a bit background on yourself and how do we make this a really good, what brings you to the call here today? How can we make this really good use of time? So something to that nature gets that person to talk as opposed to being on mute the whole time, which is a risk. Because what if Gigi doesn't like me or like my product, or is the engineering team behind building the internal build? And if she stays on mute the whole time, I made a huge mistake. And I didn't know she could be a detractor or an advocate. And so those are important pieces that you can pull out from new attendees joining a call. Always good best practice, confirm the time slot. Should have done that on this call right here. But so Dave, we got about 60 minutes, I think, left in this call. Schedule a call. Does that work for everybody here today? Great. Thank you. So do that at the beginning of the call, right? We got 30 minutes here. We got 45 minutes. Do you have a hard stop? And then someone will say, actually, I have to leave 10 minutes early. And you're like, great. Now I know I need to shorten things, change the call inaudible, so to speak. And so it's a really quick and easy question to ask right out the gates, just to extract any potential problems. And so someone just doesn't leave you in the middle of the meeting. And you're like, what the heck? What happened here? Next would be in terms of an agenda, it's quick and dirty, right? Just like I did on this call. Hey, we got 4 points we're walking through here today. We're going to talk about pre-demo, actual demo, then we're doing a live demo feedback session, then Q&A. Sound great, everybody? All right, let's go. Because if you have this really long, drawn out agenda, people really quickly tune out. So I like to keep it pretty quick as I'm moving through things. And this should take 2 minutes. This should not be a ton of time, this whole entire thing. The next would be, so before we get started, I want to just provide a quick summary of last time. I want to make sure we're all on the same page and what Dave and I talked about last time. Gigi, I know you're new, so I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Really concise 3 bullets. Hey, we talked about this thing last time. This is really important. We need to solve this because of this reason right here. Did I miss anything? And then wait. So the purpose of this is Dave might say, yeah, you nailed it right on the head, Larson. Or no, actually that metric, we're looking at that one, but we also want this one now. Or we had some internal discussion and this is slightly changed a bit. So again, these are called micro commitments. So people just gaining commitment along the way of just small things. And it can be important just to provide that summary, talk about any, there's one thing I missed, but any outstanding next steps or questions that were discussed on the previous call. Hey, last time we said we want to run through that one particular customer use case and talk through a bit about security. We're going to walk through that here today. So rest assured, we're going to get to all that. But Dave, did I miss anything here? He goes, nope. Sounds great, Larson. Cool. Let's roll. And then once you've talked a bit about them, I think it can be useful to just give a high level, quick overview of the company. I just, again, set the context because Gigi's brand new to this call. Talked to Dave last week, but Gigi's brand new. I want to make sure she has some idea of what we're about to get into. Because most likely, Dave and Gigi did not talk. Dave probably just added Gigi to an invite and she knows a little bit of what's going on. Maybe he sent an email ahead of time. But this is a good point to just build context, a similar kind of playing field for everybody on the call. And it will just be it helps make things much easier if you set that context there. Super high level overview. You can pull up a slide if you want. I like to do it verbally. For us, for demo flow, it's like, hey, listen, what we do is we help sales teams standardize all their sales playbooks around product demonstrations. That's what we do. And that's what the purpose of this call is here today, is to walk you through it. But specifically, we're going to talk through, Dave told me last week that their sales reps are spending way too much time on demo prep and we're bogging down our marketing team. So I'm going to show you specifically how we're going to walk through that. Does that sound like a good use of time? Of course, Larson, that sounds great. So super loose, super easy, really quick. And then you just blaze through the stuff really quickly. It shouldn't take a ton of time. To pause again. So I stop talking the whole time.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
I find that my sales style is much more conversational and much more like I want to almost feel like the person on the other end is like a friend and then go into the sales process. But I don't know if you could speak to that, just like different styles and not feeling so like, all right, is everything, our Zoom background's good? Or I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
if that would speak to my personal style. But
Yeah. Like, how do you mean more specifically? I Zoom backgrounds and all that stuff like that.
yeah.
That's really less of the importance here. I think the importance is just gaining context here. Tell me a little bit more about how you approach a call, and let's chat about it.
But so I've not had a ton of reps, but I will say in the conversations I've had, it's been more like, oh, I've dealt with the same issue too. That's like why I've started Inclusion Unpacked. And this is our vision for the company, and like getting them bought into why we formed. And then I actually have a sales conversation on Friday. So this is like good practice. And then launching it into what we offer. But I focus on like getting them to understand the why first. If that makes sense.
Yeah. The question I would ask you is, how do you know the why that you're working on matters to them?
Interesting. Yeah, because I'm focusing on myself, on like why I started it versus what they need. Okay. I
Yeah.
get it.
And like, when you think about your best friends in the world, right? Your best friend, do they talk about themselves and stuff, or do they ask you a bunch of questions?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
And I think my point is it's easier it's more natural for us to talk about the thing we talk about all day, every day, nonstop.
Yeah.
So that's an easy fallback, but I just want to make sure that it's relevant to them and that
Yeah.
they're not tuning you out.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Jodo?
Yeah, I wanted to second Tori's point and run our scenario by to see
Please.
your thoughts. So I take the similar approach of when we first have the call, I get in the first few minutes to tell me about the company and the organization so I can contextualize, so I speak to them. And then I do a light introduction to Fathom, but I quickly transition into trying to get them to talk about the problems that they're like struggling with in the place. And then I'd use that as a leverage. That's exactly why we started this company. I literally use their words as the segue into like why we should be having this conversation. Wondering if that's helpful to you, Tori, but also is that a solid approach?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And like all this is also a question of how much time do you have with them? 5 minutes is fairly appropriate for a 30-minute call. But the other thing that we'll talk about in a second here is remember to give back the talking stick as you're moving throughout the demo, right? We have this, maybe the first 5 minutes we're doing a great job in discovery. And then we get the talking stick and we're like, cool, I'm gonna show you my product. But it's really important to remember to ask questions throughout your demo, because you actually and we'll talk about how to do this specifically. What are good steps to confirm that something may or may not be relevant to somebody before you even show it? Because I mean, that's like the classic used car salespeople. That's what they do, is they just show up like you live in Florida and I'm selling you a 4-wheel drive car because I want you to drive in snow really well. And you're like, dude, I live in Florida. What are you talking about? I'm like, no, but it's really good. You want to make sure you're asking bits about them before it gives you context about what to focus on. So you're exactly right there. John.
Yeah, I would ask this quick question around getting the group together, because some come in later. I found a lot of times that it's more one-on-one with somebody who's like the decision maker, and then they reference us to someone else who may want to get more insight, and then they do their back end, circle back with one another. Is there a correct or a strategic or a tactical better approach to maybe postpone a meeting until the individuals can attend together? Is that something pursuing, or is there a strategic way on getting them all on the same page? And
Yeah. So the short answer is yes. There can be reasons to just pause and let's find a time where we can meet. But the reason for that pause has to be valid and defensible, more or less. If you're saying, hey, I really need your CTO, decision maker, I really need your CTO on the line for this because we're walking through security and we need to make sure that our procedures are up to par with what you all need. This is going to be more technical. So we really do need to wait on this. There is also credence to divide and conquering. So I'm going to try to find a time to meet with the CTO myself directly. If you can't make it, decision maker, there isn't really a one size fits all for that type of approach or how to navigate an organization, which I know isn't the best answer for you, but I can argue it in a lot of different ways. There, it's more contextual.
Yeah, I think that helps. I think the notes from the first meeting with any note takers we use, maybe setting that up for good posture on some of the advice you gave earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Great question. Karthik.
Related to John's question, so we're focused on accessibility, and oftentimes for us, it's really figuring out who in the organization can be that initial champion who can then go and convince others. And sometimes some companies are like, oh yeah, let me bring 10 people in on the first call itself. And sometimes that kind of I struggle with is there tends to be more skepticism about accessibility itself at its core when you have a lot of people in the same room. And then do you have any advice on how to do this correctly where try and find some champion that can almost like advocate for you and help you meet the right people as opposed to getting everyone together where there might be a couple of skeptics?
Yeah, for sure. First calls with like tons of people, 5+, even 4+, those are very challenging. Let me just call that out. If you're going to show up, you're going to bring 10 people to the call. That's a tough situation. It just is because they're all expecting a demo. They want to see the product, but you didn't gather enough information ahead of time to know what's relevant or what to focus on or why they care or any of this stuff. But clearly they care because they added 10 of their executives to the call. So in those situations, what I try to do, if I haven't really identified this best champion, whoever set up the call, I meet with them ahead of time, a week ahead of time, a couple days ahead of time, 15 minutes. And the purpose of that call, and you phrase it this way, listen, thank you so much for setting up that call with everybody to make sure I make you look good. And you make it a joke. I just want to make you look good. That's really what I'm here to do is, can you help to answer a few questions for me? I see we have 10 people on the call. And then what you do is you write all their names, all their titles, and you gather what do you think would be most important to these people. I even break them into departments too. So I know here are my technical people, here are the marketers, here are the this or that, if it's a big group. So you know where to either how to answer questions to which kind of department level or to specifically ask a question on as you're walking through a product. There might be certain things that are more pertinent to different departments. So having that map ahead of time, meeting with your champion ahead of time or whomever set up the call, it's a good show of faith. And it also shows that you're like professional. I just want to make you look good, make sure I'm showing the relevant stuff. So can you and do like a mini discovery call right there?
Got it. Very helpful. Thank you.
Cool. Anything else? Cool. No, you're not time. All right. We're cooking. I'm going to keep moving. You all still with me still? Yeah. All right. Cool. All right. This one is a weird GIF I found, but I thought cool in terms of call structures for demos. So these are going to switch pretty quickly back and forth. So this is the bad way of doing it. You start up with the feature, then go into some random timeline. This is the right way of doing it. So you have some qualification that happens. God, let's just slow down. But I'll leave it up here for a bit. And you see the middle part of the good call is like 3 features. It's really condensed. It's concise. And so really the purpose of showing this is to have a plan that you're following and to not be jumping around to a ton of different places. You want to try to maintain control of the conversation as much as you can while having a non-controlling, more casual style tone. As towards your point, like there is a lot of credence to like a casual tone is how you talk to your friends. Like you want people to, it's not really like you want them to like you, but that way a little. And what gets people to disarm and not have this wall built up here? And so it's this interesting blend of staying casual with your language and like curiosity in your tone, as opposed to we need to move to this thing next. And here's my exact questions and like a more robotic thing. Being not robotic is a tough thing to like coach. It just, I think, comes with experience and practice and repetition. So it's a tough thing, but other few key points that I found from Gong, which is a great solution out there. Some of the best performers around sales calls just do fewer context switching. So what this means in practice is If Gigi says, Larson, I want to see that feature on the left-hand side, I say, great, Gigi, that's a great, let me write that down. And I'm going to come back to that when it's relevant to this storyline. And it's not dismissive. It's actually just saying, hey, and write it down, literally write it down, write on a piece of paper or in your notepad or whatever you're doing. To say, that's a great question. I'm going to talk about that a bit later here when it makes sense, if that's all right with you. And it's a way to grab a question or objection or feature request or whatever it might be and insert it at the right spot. And it doesn't disrupt your flow. Stay on track. And I call it the parking lot. People ask you a question or they want you to go left when you want to go right. Say, hey, we're going to put that right here and let's bring it back up. Unless it's like a quick question answer type of deal. Yeah, question. Go for it.
So what do you mean by timeline?
By timeline. Like on this slide?
Yeah.
It's a good question. My hunch is, I don't know, I didn't create the slide. So my hunch is this could be a
Okay.
timeline moving forward, like a business case type of deal. Like, where do we go from here? What you told me when you buy software is you need to do some sort of procurement, security review, each legal team to look at our MSA. You need to do 2 different demos with 2 different teams. Like that could be a timeline of things. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what this meant, but I think the purpose of this is just have a plan, follow the plan, and try to stay on track as much as you can, even when you get offshoot questions.
Okay.
The first bullet in the good call slide was budget. Is it asking them what their budget is, or what does that mean specifically?
Yeah, so I think the way I look at this slide, so let's wait until it switches back. This could be like a discovery call right here. So this is a typical qualification framework called BANT. Do you have the budget? Do you have the authority? Do you have a need or a pain? And I guess timeline would be, when do you need it? No, I'm just talking through this. Timeline means when do you need to make this decision or solve this problem by? That's what that was. So this is a qualification framework to know that someone has the ability to make a purchase, authority. You have a pain or problem, which is a need. You say, have you allocated, like, how much budget have you allocated to trying to solve this? Which is a very normal question to ask, especially after you've uncovered the pain or need there. You say, so when are you trying to get this all done by? And have you allocated budget for next year, next quarter? When are you looking at solving this for? It's a very reasonable question to ask, but you have to do it in that order. Cool. Great questions. And next piece, this is going to be ironic because I've been talking for like nonstop this whole entire time, but for demos, people that do the best demos talk less. And that means not as long of a monologue. And I want you to look at this carefully. This isn't seconds in terms of a monologue. Average performers are about 20, 21. Top performers are 9. That means that you only go for 9 seconds uninterrupted. It's really more Q&A style, the way I look at this. My belief is, because demos can be fairly monologue-y, if you will, if you're walking through something. Another stat that I saw here is you shouldn't speak for more than 76 seconds uninterrupted, meaning that you're going to walk through a feature or function, then you stop and you ask them a question. How does this resonate with you? Does this seem like it'd be a good solution for what you're looking for? What are we missing here? And then you can move on to the next thing. So bottom line is, remember to continue to do discovery, continue to ask questions. That sounds great. Doc, what you got?
Yeah, just on this point, I found it really intriguing, which is, so let's say you identify the problem, you're walking through your feature demos with something in that problem. What I'm hearing from this slide is that as you walk through that feature set, even though there's perhaps a minute that you might want to talk, you should actually be breaking it up into smaller chunks where you pause and perhaps just check in. Might not even be like a full conversation, but just be like, hey, you're still with me, just being able to break it up. So you got some sort of conversation is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. My opinion of this is, go ahead.
No, I was saying, isn't this like Q&A related in that sense? Like only after an objection, right? Because
Yeah, I think
I can never speak for 9 seconds and shut
Yeah.
off.
I think the way I look at this is there's kind of 2 pieces here. The one is for like more Q&A oriented. So when you get asked a question, are you concise in how you respond to that question, or do you go on for a long time? And then the second piece is when you're walking through your product, remember to stop and make sure the conversation keeps going. When it comes to walking through a formal product demo, I like the 76-second rule for that piece, where trust me, a minute goes really quickly when you're walking through a product demo. That's a challenge. And to ask questions that many times. There's another thing we'll show in here. I think you should be asking between 14 and 16 questions in a call, having those ready, and you got to pepper those in so they're not feeling like an interrogation. And so I think this is a twofold point, where it's when you get a question, be concise in your response just to answer the question. And then the second piece is when you have the talking stick, remember to give it back, because showing full feature in 9 seconds is, I think, quite impossible, or too jolty, probably. I think it's a twofold piece. When you actually get into the product, this could be a good framework that can help with maintaining, like, staying away from, there's what people call is like a feature function demo, and like a value-based demo has outcomes attached to it. The reason why, and I can give an example of some of these pieces. Feature function is more like, so we have this filter up here, and when you roll the drop down, you can select the time and the date and the user from here, and that will narrow down this reporting into so you're basically like, it's like a harbor tour. On your left, you have a building. On the left, and on the right, you have a museum, and it's just like a tour, really. And the real art here is to make it contextual to their business. And so one framework I like to follow, and I learned this from, this isn't my methodology, it's something I learned somewhere else. It's from a company called Demo to Win, or 2Win, and they are a demo experts in the world. They are probably the foremost expert on demoing. And they have this methodology called the tell, show, tell methodology. And effectively what this means is, before I'm about to show my product, and you'll see I've been doing this a lot throughout this, I start share and I stop share quite a bit, because I want to bring it back to the conversation and away from my presentation, away from my product. And I say, all right, what I'm about to show you all is a demo framework called tell, show, tell methodology. The reason why you should care about this is it allows you to set up context for a feature you're about to show, make sure you're going to show the right things, and then you cap off that demonstration with the value points that are going to be really relevant to their business. So let me show you what that looks like. So basically, I'm taking it away from my product. I'm setting up what I'm about to show. Then I go in, and great, let's jump into this again here. And I say, here's that feature that we talked about. Over here on the left, you'll have this piece over right over here. And then at the end, so it really goes, I'm going to tell you what I'm about to show you. I'm going to show you what I just told you, what I was going to show you. And then at the end is you're going to wrap up that piece with, these are 3 kind of reasons why you should care about this. And you try to pull this from a discovery call that you may have had. What this does is it breaks up your demos into chapters, where you think about a feature as like a singular piece that you want to show somebody. And then you stop and you remember to say, okay, cool, let's bring it back to the conversation here and make sure that I'm engaging with you and it's bringing it back to you. So I bring on and off screen share, like I call it popcorn screen share, I do it like crazy. Because I think it's jarring, and I think it's like, it forces you all to like actually pay attention a little bit. Where it's, oh shit, like you're back at me now. Hey, the slideshow's gone. And so, yeah, I think that's a really important thing. Susan, I see some comments in here from you. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Oh, it's an all dramatic tool as well. Shakespeare did it beautifully, right? You say what you're going to do, you do it, and then you sum up exactly what you just did. It engages the audience. It keeps them.
Oh yeah, they just ripped off Shakespeare. How about that? Yeah, I did not know that. That's
exactly
that's
if they ripped off Shakespeare. Is exactly. I was just saying also that storytelling. Most people do chronology, and it is so boring. And it's the same with sales, because sales is essentially a form of storytelling if you do it right. Same thing. If you just get bogged down in the details, everybody's busy thinking, "Can you put cookies in the oven?" Or their brains are gone, right? So
exactly right. Cool. All right, I'm going to go rapid fire here, because I want to make sure we get to, if anyone else wants to jump in and do a demo, we can do some live feedback stuff or what have you. But I appreciate all the questions here and everything. So feel free to keep them coming. All righty. So tell us what time methodology, what this does, sets up a call, sets up a feature, shows the feature, and then you tell them, focus on those value points at the end. Gigi and I were just working on this earlier this week to make sure you're asking tons of questions throughout it. This one's specific to objections, but what we are trying to queue up is how do you have more or less a question tied to a different slide, each slide that you may have, and have those think of those ahead of time about this part of your preparation process. What do I want to be asking them? But this one is very specific to objections they make it. Frequently, as you're running through a product demo, people say, hey, this doesn't integrate specifically with this thing. Can you, that's a problem for us. The amateur sales reps out there will just rifle off some crazy response right away. Oh yeah, we hear that all the time. Don't worry. We've solved for this in the past and can give you tons of testimonials and don't worry about blah, blah, blah. The pros say, oh, interesting. Tell me a little bit more about that. Why is that really meaningful to you? That's interesting that you bring that up. And then you just shut up for a second and let them go. And what sometimes can happen is sometimes they're real. It's a real objection. They really need that. It's a real big problem, what have you. Sometimes it's just people wanting to be a little bit dismissive to a new idea. So it's a good way to disarm somebody and get somebody to actually think, is this a real thing? Or am I just throwing something out there because for whatever reason? So just remember to don't be afraid to ask a question to clarify. That's why the whole theme, I think, is important to maintain curiosity throughout it. Oh, interesting, Dave. I haven't heard that before. Tell me a little bit more about that. Why that's that meaningful to you all. So in combination of that, 11 to 14 targeted questions per call. Listen, if you want them to be well thought out questions that aren't, does that make sense? Please don't ever do that. That's another one, GG. I don't know if you're still on the call, but does that make sense is an awful question. That drives me nuts. That's not a good question. That's not that. But tell me how you see that using this in your business today. Where do you think we're aligned and where do you think we're missing the mark? These are more thoughtful questions that get somebody to actually respond more than yes or no. So another thing to keep in mind. Then we talk about this quite a bit. Popcorn screen share, start and stop. Be really familiar with Zoom. It brings it back to the conversation. Typically, when I ask a question, I'll just stop and I'll come back to the conversation. Yeah, let's talk about this for a second, so on and so forth. And so this is just to get really fluid with how do I start and stop screen share. And then when it comes to wrapping up a demo, all right, finally we're getting here. We're getting to the end of this presentation here. So I'm going to run a little over time. But so when it comes to wrapping up the demo, I think some of the best things to do is I like to say, listen, Dave, I've walked you through our whole product here today. We had a great conversation last week. I see a lot of alignments here. We work with a lot of customers just like you. And I think we can help solve out with this specific thing and this specific thing. So why do you think you're a great fit for their team? You told me that you're really trying to reduce your sales cycle time and enable your people to close more. And that's exactly what we do. I think it could be a really good fit. And I think we can really make a big impact on those numbers that you were trying to change. The problem that's causing the number to dip, So really what I think we should do as a next step is whatever the next step might be. So you need to lead them and guide them down the path. If you're just relying on them to come up with whatever they're supposed to be doing, it's going to be a tough thing. A lot of people don't really know. This kind of more or less selling the alignment that you see, how it'll impact their business. And your objective is to always sell the next call. Why should you meet again? And ideally, you've pulled out some next steps. So when it comes to the follow-up, ideally, you've documented some next steps that were discussed. Maybe they need a security packet. Maybe they need a secondary demo with their chief product officer. Maybe they need 3 case studies of relevant customers, whatever that might be. Write them down as they come up, discuss them at the end. Any outstanding questions, say, hey, Dave, cool. That sounds great. These are our next steps. These are our questions. Now, it sounds like we need to schedule a demo for next week. I got my calendar pulled open right now. Do you know if Jane's going to be available at Tuesday? Let's see, 2:00. Does that work for the two of you? And that kind of casual, I got my calendar pulled open right now. Does Tuesday at 2 work? Same time next week. That type of language, it's like casual language, but a lot of times it's much easier to not respond to an email. I promise you this, saying, hey, Dave, I want to meet with you next week. And I followed you 14 times just to get a meeting booked. It's much harder to ignore me than it is to cancel a meeting that we scheduled. So if you can get a calendar invite out right away, that is a fantastic idea. Certainly best practice. And that what you really want to do is just summarize all these notes, next steps into an email, fire that off to everyone that was on the call. And just help to build consensus, and you equip that person with collateral that helps them sell it internally. So in summary, as we close this part of it, so remember, run through your introductions and agendas, do a quick summary of last time, brief company overview if it makes sense. And then remember that tell, show, tell methodology, pop or screen share, right, on and off, bring it back to that conversation, make sure you wake people up a bit. And then as you're ending a call, do some sort of value. Why am I doing that? A value statement, set a time and date of a follow-up step, get that calendar invite sent off. And I promise you'll be in a much better position. So that is the end of my spiel here.